And we are back. It's your man, Odell, aka Art by Odell, back for another episode of Odell's Roundtable. Excited and thankful to have you here. Uh, However, you check out the platform. Normally, we record out of the Live Hip Hop Daily Studios, but right now, we're doing this remote during this whole pandemic thing. But still, shout out to Live Hip Hop Daily, Herb, and shout out to my boy Jay Black, my producer, Innovative Black Station. Check out all those platforms. You can catch me and reach me on social media at Art by Odell, ARTBYODELL. And so maybe this is your first time checking out Odell's Roundtable. I appreciate you first and foremost. What is Odell's Roundtable? It's a place where we discuss topics mainly on relationships. And at first we used to talk about dating relationships. But at this point, I tell people this is kind of how, wild, wild west out there. You got to kind of make your own way. But when it comes to business and life and networking, I really think sometimes people overlook those relationships, and those are very important as well. And I feel that's where my strong point is and where I want to place the emphasis on. But also, too, is I use my platform to interview and introduce amazing people I feel you should know about, right? And so I am very excited because today I have one of those amazing, interesting people I feel you should know about. So first, let me go ahead and give a brief introduction, right? So the guest I have today is a true example of how, talent meets style, a forerunner in the whole streetwear scene, using his camera to capture images from everyday people to some of the biggest names you find in fashion, right? From New York City to Japan to Italy, working with outlets like GQ Japan, Marie Claire, also a regular at the Pitti trade show that takes place in Florence, Italy. And recently his IG Live series, Speakeasy, has made me appreciate him even more, right? Having a range of amazing guests. I'm talking about from VP creative directors like Eric Jennings to fashion icons like Carl Kanai to one of my childhood favorites in hip hop, Big Daddy Kane, and the amazing conversation he had with Play of Kid and Play. You should definitely check out. Any person who is just a creative or just somebody who's chasing excellence should definitely watch that conversation he had with Play. It was just really amazing. So please help me welcome the man who I actually reached out to on IG like over a year or so ago, right? And I remember when I hit him in the comments and replied to him, I hit him with his full name, but he replied back to me that my friend simply called me Guerre. So thank you. I have Guerre on the show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm well. Thank you for having me, Odell. It's really a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Oh man, no, it's really good to have you. And like I said, I think I ran across your work. I want to say I saw you in the Rake magazine.
Okay.
And I was like, man, look at this stylish brother, man. That's how to follow you and whatnot, and just enjoy everything that you're doing, right?
I appreciate
And
that.
so I wanted to talk with you today. Just a myriad of things we could talk about, but we intentionally said we're going to talk and discuss. I want to say something about how I read in an interview one time you had with, I want to say it was Gentleman Gazette, and you talked about walking that fine line between artistry and intelligence, right? And urban and cosmopolitan, finding that balance. And I even think with 9 to 5 to entrepreneur, all these different things that we're trying to find this balance, man. Like, is it even more right now, like trying to find that fine line? I mean, there's really no rules no more.
There are definitely no rules, Odell. I think that it all comes down to being honest and being truthful to yourself. I think there are those who, for example, can be artists. And what I mean by that is I have a friend, for example, when I first learned what a true artist was, this is years ago, maybe 15 years ago. I remember there's a friend of mine who came to stay at my house. He was a painter.
Okay.
And he stayed with me for months, actually. Long story short, I remember waking up when middle of the night, he was painting, went to bed, woke up the next morning, going to work. I was working a 9 to 5 at the time. He was still painting, went to work, came back home. He was still painting. I asked him if he ate. He didn't remember. Number two, he had paint on my ceiling, on my fridge, all over the house. Also, actually, the only time he stopped painting was he was studying the human body. And I asked him why he was doing that. And he told me he was about to paint a person and he needs to know every single muscle in the human body so that when he painted the person, he would paint it correctly, the movement. And at that moment, I understood what a true artist was, a person who sacrifices everything for the sake of the art, number one, including his own self, his own personal well-being sometimes, for the sake of the art. So I understood what an artist was and understood the studying that was necessary to become an artist. Not just, oh, I can do this and I'm good. It was about constantly developing and sharpening your craft. So I saw that and I said, Jesus Christ, I can't be an artist. so, so for me, you see what I'm saying? So for me, it was a question of not being able to live that lifestyle, because that's not me to live like that. And at the same time, it's not for me to live completely a 9 to 5. That wasn't my lifestyle either. I've done that for a period. My truth lied somewhere in the middle of being able to do a little bit of both, which is very consistent with who I am as an individual. That's why even in terms of the way I dress, it's a little bit always a combination of two extremes. You know, so everything I do seems to come from that. It's nothing that I plan or I envisioned, but it just seems normal that it's always the two extremes. Somehow I find that common ground. So that's really where this whole thing came of just being able to be, I can't be that guy who's just hood, or I can't be that guy who's just straight the opposite, whatever you want to call the opposite is. There's something in me that just wants to travel and fit in without losing myself in any environment.
Wow. Wow. Listen, one of the main things, just taken from that, one of the first things you said, which I think is so true, is you're being honest with yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is so key. And looking at, the way you dress and your style, let's go ahead and go into it. It would be remiss to not talk about style and fashion, because when I think about style and fashion, right, to me, it's kind of similar to, I look at it from like a cooking standpoint, analogy I always use, right? Because I remember back in college and high school, I worked at the Gap. So when I first started, like, really, I kind of appreciating clothes, and then you start going up even more, right? But one thing about like fashion and style, I feel like the reason I use the analogy of cooking is I wouldn't consider myself like no world trained chef, but I'm very comfortable in the kitchen, right? Like I know how to cook my meals and I know how to do different things. And I think once you start exhibiting style and fashion, you start learning about different clothing pieces, you can put things together. Like what would be your take on style and fashion? I think sometimes from that popularization rise, and you work with the magazines and the things like that, like style is like forced on you. But I think really and truly, when you really think about style, it's not all of this fashion flair. What would you say about that?
I mean, for me, there's always been a difference between style and fashion. That's for sure. So I think that fashion, I've always said that fashion is something you do maybe to speak how you feel at a moment. Let's put it that way. Or your mind state at a moment. That might be what fashion is. Meanwhile, style is the inner voice or the inner you coming out and expressing itself in different ways, whether it's through the way you dress, the way you approach the world, the way you think, the way you attack anything you do in life. I think that's style. And the fashion side of it is something that's constantly changing. It's constantly, and don't get me wrong, because I think style does evolve and it changes, but I think that fashion is more, it's superficial. It's just basically an abstract. It's something that you throw on every 3 months because it's the fashion changes every 3 months. Right. So you're chasing trends, and that's really what fashion's about. I think that's the superficial part of what it is. Meanwhile, I think the style part is, even though there's an evolution of the individual, so there are changes still. We all aspire, hopefully, to be better and to know more. So I think that style changes, but the core of style remains the same. And then what happens is you're able to verbalize it, showcase it to the world, maybe a little differently, but when you look at the person, you still see the same core. And that to me is what style's all about. And I think that's one of the things that, for example, magazines were missing, but then I say to myself, they're not really missing it. It fits their agenda. and they're not really pushing style. What they push is more fashion because that's what sells for them. So they only talk in the language of fashion.
Right. Wow. Wow. When you say that, it makes me think back to, like I said, like when I first got that job at the Gap years ago, because it started introducing me to other things, but it was still ultimately my friends, when they would see me, they'd be like, that's still Odell's style, right? I just started getting
Yeah,
introduced to clothing and I go to different stores.
that's right.
But ultimately, it would come back to something, even though it's a new piece. I'm like, man, let me throw this scarf in the game. Let me throw this in the
Exactly.
game. But it still kind of
Yeah.
came back to like, that's
There's
you.
a signature. You know what? One of the things that really stood out to me, for example, I remember when you see a lot of guys who quote unquote have style or fashion, whatever you want to call it, when you look at them, sometimes what happens is one day they're wearing the basketball jersey. The next day they're wearing a Wall Street look, a three-piece suit or whatever it is. Um, and sometimes I would wonder, and I hear all the time that, oh yeah, well, my style is just so, I have a wide range in style. And then I'm like, nah, you really don't have any style at all. Um, and it's not a knock per se. What it is when I think about, for example, style, when you look at, for example, let's just use an example of any movie. Like there's, I think it's The Great Gatsby. I don't know if you're familiar with that whole, okay,
Oh, yeah.
that mirror. But the point is that they could wear a suit, but then you would see the same guy in a suit and you look at what he wears when he's in leisure. And he actually could wear a tennis outfit or whatever, but it's consistent. You see what I'm saying? So you can
Right.
dress it down. Yeah. So I'm not saying the guy can't wear a pair of jeans and then wear a suit the next day. But you see, there's always a common thread through that whole look, even though the outfit may look completely different.
Right.
That
Right.
that to me is when you have style. Is when, yeah, I could wear certain look. I could go casual for sure. But the
Right.
point is, my casual is still going to be consistent with my up, whatever you want to call the other thing, my more formal looks. There's a signature that's always there, and I think that's where style is. It's in the signature.
I definitely agree with you on that because, like I said, and going back to what I said about that same thing as far as like the cooking analogy type thing, right? Like a lot of
Yeah.
times, that same thing would happen. I remember ex-girlfriend was telling me, like, you cook stuff, but it always kind of comes back to the same kind of dish, right? Because
That's
you
your
know, you find,
strong point. But no, but that's what it is when you find your niche, and that's very true. I think that, and it goes back to what I said earlier about being honest with yourself, because once I think you realize your strong points, why would you stray away from that? I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, you can adapt new things, learn new things, but you can't go too far from your strong points. So you should always incorporate that in whatever you're doing. But I think the hardest part for people is actually finding out what their strong, being honest with themselves and finding out what their strong point is. I think we aspire for something else always, that we're not necessarily satisfied with what we actually do have to offer.
I see what you touched on right there is so true because, like I said, once you realize like who you are, what you want to portray, then
Yeah.
at that point it's your decision what you want to make, right? And how you want that to look. Because I remember same thing, right? Like a lot of times I just kind of reached a point where I say, style looks it's progressed, right? And so I
For
remember
sure.
going to media events and different things, and my buddy was telling me like, you're the only person here, with a button down shirt. I can't worry about that, right?
Exactly.
I can't concern myself about that. Like, I'm not doing this to try to blend in, nor am I trying to do this to stand out. I'm doing this because when I see the world to see me, I want them to see what I'm trying to put out there. Because once again, kind of go back to trying to be honest about myself. So,
Yeah,
man,
definitely.
that is so
Definitely.
true. So, speaking of, I mentioned your IG Speakeasy Lives, right? And
Mhm.
just the great conversations you've been having with those. And a couple of those one I really enjoyed the one you had with Mr. Mort.
Okay.
Y'all guys had some really good conversations. But one of the things you said in there that really made me think back, and it kind of go back to you spoke on like fashion and style. You spoke on how you guys made the fashion editors dress better because they were
Oh
hiring you
man.
guys to do work, and you guys are looking better than the fashion
Yeah,
editors, right? So
that's right.
it kind of goes back to that analogy of everyday fashion really coming from everyday people rather than the billboards.
For sure.
But like you said, though, the fashion editors, they're never going to empower people like that.
Exactly. Exactly. I think it's, for example, with street style didn't get big until editors were being photographed. Um, and it gets big because now that they're putting their editors in the spotlight, it kind of brings the attention to them. And you're like, oh, okay, let's make this even bigger. Of course, everybody wants to be seen, but they're in a position of power where they can actually publish certain things. And then, of course, the money comes into play at that point. So it changes again the dynamics of anything. So I think that definitely was the case. But yeah, I think, but when you think about it for a second, when you think about fashion editors, why should they be stylish if you're sitting behind a desk writing an article or going from one place to another showroom just to go look at clothing? You don't really have to have great style. You just have to understand fabric. You have to know the technical side of clothing. You know how you have to do your research, know your history of clothing. And so you don't necessarily need, that doesn't translate to a person that knows how to dress or have style.
Right.
But once again, once you started taking pictures, the magazines were like, hey, our editors are going to be at such and such show. You might want to make sure you catch them. And then now the editors have to dress up. They force their editors to dress up. And once they start forcing their editors to dress up, obviously the brands like that. And of course, they're going to advertise more in the magazines that see their clothing. It's the monster, you create
Right,
a
right.
monster. So yeah,
Well, it's funny too, because that same kind of thing kind of happened kind of like with hip hop journalism too, right? It used to be all these guys behind these desks, but
yeah,
then when the journalists started stepping out
yeah,
and started doing,
exactly.
like you said, they're like, okay, I got to dress, I got to start looking
I
at the
got it.
part too. I got to start, because, when you're not behind a computer or a desk no more, now people know your
Exactly.
face, they know your name.
Exactly. And it's a bit of shame because I think we get caught up, and I understand it's the dynamic of things. You can't get too stuck on nostalgia and like how it was in the days gone by where you sit there and you're like, oh, well, no, it's not that. I understand the dynamics have changed. Social media is in play now. It changes the dynamic of things. So you have to adapt, you adjust to it. But I've always said that, for example, for me, I've always said that the more stylish people are the ones that probably don't even know about fashion shows. They're the ones that don't know about the fact that, because they're not even people that go to fashion shows get dressed to go to the fashion show. Meanwhile,
Right.
stylish people just do what they do.
Oh,
They're
seriously.
not a. So for me, the more stylish people are the ones that don't go to the show. The reason I would go to show is it's a, the reason I would go to the show, to be honest with you, to shoot there is because it made more sense. It saved me a lot of time from walking around a lot because it was a concentrated group of people. You
Right.
see what I'm saying? So you got a lot of people. So instead of me walking the streets for 5 hours looking for stylish people, I might as well go to a fashion show and they got a bunch of people. I have a better chance on finding 5, 6 people that dress well at the shows.
Right.
So, it was just a matter of that. But stylish people,
Who
I
are some
feel
of the
like
most
they're in the
stylish people
streets.
you ever came across, or people you just saw on the street, though? So,
That's it. To me, that's the real ones. I think anybody who did this before cameras were involved or they weren't concerned with the cameras, those to me are the stylish people. I think when
wow.
you change your dynamic and you change the way you get up in the morning and you focus on putting on these clothes, these things. I mean, not to say people didn't focus on it before, but I think it's a lot different because people now know about street style photographers. They know that if they go in certain areas, people are gonna be there to shoot them most likely. I mean, it changes the dynamic of the authenticity. I think that's what it is for me, the authenticity of it.
Yeah, goes back to that first part we said about being honest, which is so true.
That's hard. It's hard. It's hard to be honest now. These days, it's hard to be honest.
Yeah, that is true. That is a double-edged sword at times. But on Odell's Roundtable, we talk about relationships, right? And so,
Definitely.
and building great relationships with amazing people. I'm interested because you've been able to make these great relationships and have these speakeasy with so many people, right? So from like ranging from the Big Daddy Kanes to
Mm,
the VPs at fashion shows to
yeah.
all kind of amazing folks. What would you say though? Because what would you say is a common ground or a common theme you would find in all of these people? Because you talk with, what's something that you would find like a common ground with all these folks?
I'll tell you right now, though, when I came into this, I've always said that While my main concern initially when I came in was, number one, I felt, and mind you, this was a little bit around 12 years ago. At that time, there was no Instagram, there was no barely any blogging with this in mind. I was actually one of the first 5 guys to do street style, digital. All right. And one of the reasons I did it is because I felt that there wasn't, I understood one thing. For example, I understood that guys in the inner city, in New York City, for example, at the time, I don't know if it was around 250 to go into the city, to take a subway to go into the city. And I thought about it. I would see a lot of young guys dressed a certain way, influenced by hip hop. And I would always wonder, why is that the only way they want to dress? I always wondered it. Why? Then I realized something. I said to myself, you know what? It costs almost $5 to go out of your neighborhood and come back. $5. Who is going to invest? If you really don't have that much money, are you really going to invest $5 to go to the city just to see something different? You see? So for me, what I said is, I know they're not going to that different environment. Let me bring that different environment to them. And it was almost my responsibility to say, okay, well, you're not going here to these places, so I'm going to go to these places and I'm going to find guys that I think you're going to appreciate and think are cool. And it's going to give you a new visual playing field that you can look at and say, wow, you know what? These guys are also cool the way they dress. So it opened up a lot of new area for a lot of young guys. That's really what I wanted to do this for. And when I started it, so that was my main purpose when I started it. Then what happened is, one thing that I realized real quickly was that there was a focus on age groups. A lot of brands, for example, focus on an age group, whether it's 18 to 26, whatever age group they want to focus on. And then I understood one thing, that style was not, you can't put style in an age group category. Style is a state of mind. And that's what I always wanted to speak to. I always wanted to speak to a state of mind. So my thing was always, whether you're 18 or you're 75, if you have a state of mind that style was something important to you, then you would understand what I'm talking about. And I've been very fortunate to be able to access that, because the range of people I speak to, the young cats, they respect what I say. They understand me in terms of, I'm not too far away from them. And the older guys will look at me and they respect me as well. So it's bridging the gap is exactly what I've been doing, I feel. So when you ask me what, and I'm sorry I said all of that, but the point is that the one thing that all these guys that I'm able to speak to have in common is that they understand style. And while everybody's style may be a little different, there's something that joins us together. And that's understanding that style isn't just about clothing, it's about lifestyle, you see? And to me, that's what it is that I speak to these people about. It's not really, I touch up a little bit about the clothes they wear, that's fine, but there's something so much deeper than that. It's always about the lifestyle. And I could care less about a guy who dresses well, to be honest with you. I mean, that doesn't move me. It's a guy that puts on nice clothes. That's the guy who puts on nice clothes. But you show me a guy who lives his life, and nobody's a saint, you know what I mean? Nobody's a saint or perfect or that, but I think that at least you have a certain moral code, and you understand that style isn't just about promoting yourself, but it's also about giving back. And that's what these guys have in common, I feel, that they all want to give back in one way or the other.
No, that's definitely well put as far as where you say that, because like I said, I've gotten something from each one of those conversations, and ironically, the fashion part, like I watched the one you did with was it Eric Jennings, the creative director, and I got a couple of things from a style fashion, but most of the stuff was just like some good life gems. I was like, man, I was like, okay, like I'm thinking I'm gonna be taking notes on, okay, this guy, I mean, he's worked with all these big fashion brands. I think I'm gonna know exactly about like this trend and this and that. And I'm like, only thing I think I maybe touched on, I think I hopped into IG Live, he started talking about washable suits. And kind of
yeah, that's right. Some wool fabric that you can throw in the washing machine now. Yeah,
but outside of that, I mean, everything else was just like, man, it's like life was like, okay, how he worked hard, how he did this, how he did that. And I was like, man, it definitely is something you can appreciate.
Let me say this, Odell. I think that for me, what I've always believed is that I've always, and I use this analogy, I have a 7 and a 9-year-old daughter, two daughters. And I've always told them, I was just telling them like 2, 3 days ago, I wanted to ask them, what's the difference between a piece of glass and a crystal?
Mm.
And I explained to them that we should be like a crystal. And the glass is one dimensional. And that's why when the light shines through it, it's nothing very special. It's just a piece of glass and it's actually not natural. You have to shape it like that.
Right.
Meanwhile, a crystal has all these facets. And for me, style is about complementing or working on all those facets that make you evenly. So that means that as much time as these guys put in putting their clothing on and dressing, you need to put just as much time in your education, just as much time in your health, the way the way you communicate with people. All these are different sides, and that's what makes it a crystal, and that's what makes it beautiful when the light hits it. Because if it's only one side, it's a piece of glass, and
Right.
that's really what I think. And that's why, like I say, even in terms of style and talking to guys, dressing is cool. It's fun, and it's actually, like we all know, it's actually a icebreaker for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because if you dress a certain way, then at least you have an opportunity to present something. You
Right.
better have something to present after.
Right. It's like that.
Hopefully you have something that you can present. Yeah.
Right. It's like that conversation starter, but then, like you said, once the
Yeah.
conversation starts.
What's next? Exactly. What's
Exactly.
next?
Wow. That is so cool. So, you spoke about leaving. I'm not saying leaving, but the ratio of going to a fashion show and finding so many people as opposed to like walking the streets for 5 hours and just have that group of people in a certain place. And I mentioned the pity show in Florence that you usually go
Mhm.
to, which I'm not sure. There's so many things that are happening this year right now, or things are moving around and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
it's not going to happen. It's definitely not happening.
Yeah. So, but just speak on like going to events like that. I guess like how did that change things? 'Cause I know for me, when the first times, when I went out to like Seattle and I covered like my
Mhm.
first huge music festival,
Mhm.
and I have my press pass and I'm sitting there with other people and people are looking at me like,
Wow.
"Hey, we recognize you as this person." Like, it kind of changed my whole mindset. And I came back, it didn't change me like, oh, I gotta do this or do that, but I'm saying this opened me up to certain things.
For sure.
When I took pictures of the show and how it looks and how all these people converge on Florence and whatnot, but you still get a chance to do your own thing. Like, what did that do for you?
I think you hit it on the head. I think number one, it opens up your scope, your perception of the world. That's number one for me. What happens is any travel, to be honest with you, it's a beautiful thing when you can leave because once again, we're part of what makes us is our environment. And when you can change your environment, then you can actually add new layers to yourself. That's how I look at it. So like going to Florence was just amazing. And when I first went, which was so funny because the dynamics in Florence changed also. When I went, for example, I think there were, honestly speaking, there were less than maybe 3 or 4 black guys in Florence at the time. Um, so there weren't that many.
Stood
So it
out.
became very interesting. You know what it is? Because I think it was, you had it's been going on for years. Florence has been around Pity's been around for years. So I know guys that used to go 20 years ago, some brothers that were going 20 years ago. But the point is that it's an industry thing. So it wasn't that many guys going, let's put it that way. Long
Yeah.
story short, fast forwarded to 3, 4 years ago, I had guys come to me and the Africans come to me and tell me, man, we came here because of you. you know, we didn't know about Pity, and then we found out about it. We have to come. And this Pity, for those who don't know, is basically the Disney World for men fashion. If you What Disney World is for kids, Pity is for guys who love fashion.
Right.
It's like you got Epcot Center, you got this, it's the same thing over there. You got a little bit for everybody's taste over there. So I don't know if I answered the question, but yeah, I think it definitely, traveling in general just opens up your perception of things. One thing that I learned, for example, just going to Italy, one of the things that I realized um, is when we talk about being rich, it doesn't necessarily always mean financially rich.
Mm.
That's where you see, for example, the families coming together, and they may actually, the kids may dress up on a Sunday to sit down at the table to eat dinner with the whole family. It's a very important meal for them to eat dinner. Simple things. It's not about expensive things. It could be about a pasta that they make, and you're like, we're enjoying pizza, we're enjoying pasta. So
Right.
then you realize that sometimes it's not about what we think that's important. Sometimes it's quality of life that matters, you see? And I think that's part of what traveling opened my eyes to, is understanding that it's about quality of life. Sometimes it's not about acquiring this, acquiring that, but what's important to you, and understanding that. So for me, quality of life, I think also in Haiti was another example of that. My parents are from Haiti, and I lived there for 5 years. And one thing that I realized is that, which is very interesting, for example, I would see Haitians, who are the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but you don't see that they're broken in spirit. Even though they're in a bad state financially, they're not broken in spirit. They're still smiling. There's something still they're proud. But here, when you're financially broke, you'll be mentally broke, emotionally broke. It spiritually, it really, it, it's it's bad
Yes.
to be financially broke in the United States, because there's just too much around here, too much to see, too much to get that you can't get. It just destroys you. It's something that just leaves a void in you. So I think the traveling, and that's why I'm saying all this to say that traveling is so important, because once you start to see these things and you see that other people in the world can live a certain way, then it allows you to reevaluate what's important to you. And then you can, you reposition your mindset and yourself, and you decide how to move from there. So that's it.
I definitely, I agree with everything you said, and the adjusting part is so true. I mean, as of right now, I think a lot. No, well, I know a lot of people are going to be adjusting how they move going forward,
For
just
sure.
from how we are operating during this pandemic. I mean,
Mhm.
it's allowed us to readjust some things. So I totally agree with you on that, and that's a great point. Also about the spirit, kind of reminds me when my dad's family is from Mississippi and my mom's from Alabama. And
Oh,
I
wow.
remember going to see somebody, my dad's folks in Mississippi, and they're not even, I mean, it's like backwood type stuff. I remember like being at the house and people coming over bringing food, and I'm sitting there, because my dad's in the military, so I was like a little military brat. So I'm already like, this is not good enough for us. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are we doing?
Hmm.
Everybody was happy. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
I look at my cousins and stuff like, why are y'all happy, man? Like, this is, but they, you know what I'm saying? They were enjoying,
That's
they were
right.
getting their own fish and things like that. So it was like, it was a certain joy. So that's very true. But before I go into my last question, I want to make sure that you tell the people how they can get in contact with you, anything you got going on with yourself, just any information. The floor is
I
yours.
appreciate it.
Go right ahead.
I appreciate it. Well, on Instagram, my Instagram account is Guerrisms, and it's pretty simple. Send me a DM through that. That's fine. I also have a website. It's guerrisms.com. And my email information is right on that, which is info@guerrisms.com. In terms of projects that I'm currently working on, the one thing about me is I feel that I'm a modder. What's the word? I'm more of I bridge things together. That's really what it is. Even photography, I didn't come in as a photographer. Funny thing. I just say I take some decent pictures. So occasionally I take some nice pictures.
Okay.
Um, but my thing is to fill in voids. That's how I look at it. When there's something missing, I'm not gonna sit there and argue and complain about it. I'll try to find a way to fix that situation, almost until that other photographers jumped on the bandwagon. I'm almost like, okay, it's time for me to leave the photographers, let them do their thing. It's time for me to move on to the next thing, because there's always bridges that need to be built. So I think even with the speakeasies is exactly that. It was just a place that I felt like, okay, I'm tired of doing pictures and pictures and pictures. People are tired of seeing pictures. Let's get some substance. So
Mm,
that's really what it is. So once again, yeah, projects that I'm working on right now, I do have one or two things. I've learned not to talk too soon, um, because I don't want to be one of those guys who talks a lot. Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'll do it. I'll do it, and then I'll put it up when it's done and ready. But yeah, I'm definitely working on some projects now, moving away from photography. Let's just say it's more video based. I think that's where I want. That's my next way to communicate style, is in that platform.
Definitely, you're doing amazing work. So I always end the show with the question: what are your keys to building great relationships?
Wow. Um, I think honestly, I'd like to say go from I want to say go from the heart, be true and be honest. And what I mean by that is you can make relationships with people, but it's about finding something that's true to you, because you'll meet a lot of people along the way, but they may not connect with you. They may advance you in some way, shape, or form. But if you truly want to be happy and for personal growth, I think it's about being honest with yourself, understanding what people's roles in your life they may be. You know, you work with people, but you connect with the right people, and just be open. Just be, you know, you're just a small piece in this big game of life. So understand that. Don't ever think you're bigger than what you really are. And once you understand that, you talk to people, you deal with people, and there's so many life lessons you can learn. I think that's really what it boils down to.
Wow, but that's, you know what, you made a great point about that part, because especially from my times dealing with the music industry and things of that sort, I mean, you see people who clearly have made relationships with people for advancement or things like
Yeah,
that. That's cool, but like you said, that's not going to be any joy in that, right? It's not, you know, I mean, I know
nah,
people who I've conversated with, you know, for certain things, but I'm not necessarily trying to play the fake
exactly.
friend or something like that, right?
Mhm.
Like there's certain people you got to know just for different things, but like you
That's
said,
it.
if you go down the road of thinking that, oh my God, I'm like, why are you trying to
Yeah,
just get the
exactly.
press pass or whatever it is, but you know, don't try to make it more than what it is, you know.
Exactly. And stay away from negative energy. You know, just build and move forward, and hopefully just keep doing positive things. That's it. And positive, when I say positive, not just for yourself, but the community around you. I think that's the most important thing.
I definitely agree with that too, because I want to say also that I saw more upward trajectory for me when I stopped worrying about that, right? So I'm like going to an event and not worrying about who is there or whatnot, just talking to people. And then that's when you usually end up talking to somebody who really can make things happen, or you just have a
Yeah.
good connection. But when I,
But it's scary though. We have to just let everybody know, and I think that's so important to let the younger guys know that it's a little scary, because sometimes when you do that, you feel all by yourself. You know, you're going against what everybody else is going, and sometimes that's the best move. You can't run away from that. Don't go the way direction everybody else is going. Sometimes you just have to do what's true to you, and I think you benefit more from that.
that's very true. Yeah, and that's, I will say I feel the same way, that I've been able to bridge that gap as well, because like you said, I put the community first. I feel like there's so many people I can connect with folks, and you know, people have always said, hey, you know, can you connect with this person or do this, or what can I do for you? And once you start doing that, everything kind of changes. So first off, Guerre, listen, I want to thank you for the time, for
I
being on the
appreciate
show. It's really amazing though, like I said, because just like those brothers from Africa, you would meet at Pity and
it.
say they came there for you. I'm similar, like a lot of these things that I started checking out is seeing you. Like I said, literally, you know, I remember I like to go to Barnes and Nobles and go to look through the magazines and whatnot. I used to work at a Barnes and Noble, so I would always go in there. And magazines are always my thing. And I just remember going through these magazines, and I'm like, who is this brother? You know, so
That's crazy.
out. And then I started following you on IG, and then because also too, sometimes you see a cat in this major magazine, you think like, oh, what kind of cat is this gonna be? You know, and I started following this Instagram. I'm like, this is just a cool brother. You know what I'm saying?
I
This
appreciate
is
that.
a cool dude just doing his thing. So it inspired me to start checking out other stuff, looking at other things. So you definitely, the work you're doing is
I
inspiring. So it's
appreciate it.
good to see that you're touching people, and the fact that you're going to do more video and more things like that, whatever it is, I definitely support it. You have a knack for it, and the conversations you're having are needed.
I really appreciate it. And let me say this before I let you go, Odell. I want to let you know as well that what you're doing is amazing. And what you're doing is actually forcing gentlemen like myself, guys like myself, to really look into themselves. And what I mean by that is, I remember one conversation. I apologize, I don't remember who it was, but I remember one conversation that really stood out to me. There was a point in it where it was about understanding exactly what something means, if that makes any sense to you.
Okay.
I think you were talking to somebody about, yeah, I feel bad. You were talking to somebody, I think it was about marketing a little bit. It was a
Oh,
marketing
it might
conversation.
have been Kareem Latif, like the brand marketing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Shout
And
out
you
to
guys were,
Kareem. I gotta have him
okay.
back. We always had some good conversations. Great, really good brother, man. Really good cat. But go ahead, go ahead.
It's funny because I think I met him a while back in New York, and I had actually sent him a message not too long ago. And then when I saw that you had actually interviewed him, I was like, I definitely need to talk to him. But
You need
it's
to
a
talk
prime
to
example. You know what?
him.
It's a prime
I think you
example.
get connected.
I appreciate it, man, because I tell you, it's an example of understanding that you need to sharpen your tool.
Mhm.
And in that conversation, it was like, brothers can't come to me and talk about business. I'm an influencer when you don't even know how to influence. You don't know what that really means, the business
Right,
side
right.
of it. So once again, what you're doing is really beneficial to a lot of young guys that are coming up who want to do something they need to hear. And that's the problem, I think, sometimes. Sometimes we see what's glittering.
Mhm.
We see all the final product. We see this wad of money that guys are flashing. They're showing this, they're showing that, but they don't understand this side of the business, this side of the game. And that's so important that they understand they got to have it balanced. Because if
Yeah.
they don't have what you're preaching, what you're sharing with them, there's no way they're going to get to that other point. Or if they do, it won't last. So I appreciate you for what you're doing.
Oh, listen. First, I'll just receive that and I'll say thank you. And real quick, it's amazing going back to that Kareem Latif interview. I'll say this: I haven't really shared this before, but when he did that interview, I was a little worried at first because like sometimes you try to reach out to somebody and like he had went kind of dark on social, right? So oh
Mm-hmm.
my god, I don't know how to connect. I'm like, is he gonna come through to the studio? And he wasn't feeling good actually as well.
Okay.
He had told me he's like, man, I'm not really feeling good, this and that, but like. It seemed like as soon as the lights went on and I started hitting him
Hey.
with the questions, I think part of it too, I hit him with some good questions and then everything just changed. And so I
Yeah.
always,
He's
I
got to
get,
share. He's one of them brothers that he has to share. And that's what it is about guys with style. It's you give back. It's not for his own benefit. He's just speaking from the heart and he's telling you what it is. So that's a beautiful thing.
yeah, yeah, for real. Like I said, I mean, literally, I was like, okay, how's this going to go? But literally, like you said, I mean, the question went on and then we started talking, the fact that he had people from Alabama as well. Like my mom's from Alabama.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But nah, I mean, I'll definitely make sure. 'Cause he does a lot more work in New York now as well, too. So, I
That's
mean,
where I know I met it. I know we met. We actually met at an event, and I know we exchanged. I think we may have exchanged numbers at the time, but nothing ever happened. So I was like, I would love to get him in on a speakeasy,
oh,
and just talk about stuff. So definitely, if that's possible, I would
oh, listen,
appreciate it, brother.
the fact that could be able to maybe play a part in that speakeasy happening and watch that happen,
I
consider
appreciate it.
consider that
Thank
part
you.
done. I can't say it's going to happen, but I will consider the part of me helping.
Hey, that's all. That's all I ask. That's it. I
Well,
thank
listen,
you.
yeah, it has been great. And once this thing is over with and travel does start happening again, you're ever in Atlanta, you already know definitely going to connect, get together, and same New York. I mean, I got to get to New York at some point too,
Hmm.
connect. So I definitely, I just look forward to connecting with you, brother.
I look forward to it. And I'm definitely going to be in Atlanta because there's some things that I want to do over there as well. There's some people I want to connect with. So I really look forward to that. And I will make sure we connect when I'm out there. That's for sure. And
Yes,
you have an open invitation here in New York as well. So if you're ever here, I have to see you here.
nah, for sure. We're going to definitely do that as well. So
That's what's
listen,
up.
I want you to stay safe out here, stay connected. I love speaking to your girls, man, when one of your daughters like intros your show.
Uh, I might have to do more, actually. That'll be my thing. Let her do it.
Yeah, when she intros the show and everything, that's great stuff, man. So
All right.
keep up the amazing work. Like I
Thank
said,
you.
and I tell people all the time, a lot of times, you just gotta, visualize things and then put the work in. So like I said, I remember just saying when I saw that picture and saw this article about you in the rake and stuff like that, and I was like, I was gonna meet this brother, however it's gonna happen, and
Hey,
organically, right? Like I
we
said,
did. And it's real. There you go. Well, I appreciate it once again.
for sure, man. So listen, we'll sign off, man. You be good, be safe. We'll talk with you soon.
Definitely. Odell, take care. Thank you again.
Odell's
Ciao.
Roundtable.